Hello, my name is He Who Is in the Water, and last weekend I got to play at the Richmond Sector Qualifier, and just kind of wanted to talk about my experience there, the events I played in, how I did. Wasn't good, but just kind of go through that. So, in the last video, I kind of outlined several brews that I had been working on to try to target the expected metagame that was heavily dominated by Django. Django ended up eating a ban, as did Triple Dark Raid and DJ, which affected the Han Solo deck. Crucially, the Triple Dark Raid ban, which I think was excellent. I think I think TDR and DJ were absolute musts. I get the Django ban. I think was reasonable. I think leaving Tarkin Town is not the best, but it's also not the worst thing ever, because you can build decks that are good against Tarkin Town, but it's also just a very common card, and just kind of the way they're designing things. It's just so easy to build the Tarkin Town deck, and there's very little reason to not run it, because it's just useful over the course of normal gameplay, even if you're not that built around it. But that's neither here nor there. Great bans in general really improved the health of the format. TDR is just not something that can exist in this kind of environment. I don't know, maybe when rotation happens and we get the Eternal format that comes from it, maybe TDR can be good there, but I would be really concerned about TDR in that environment as well. Boba Fett and Jango Fett, I think, are in a non-rotating Eternal format. I think those leaders are going to be fine, but TDR is insane. It just means you can't have any, if there's a single good ETB on a vehicle that costs 5 or more, then you're going to see TDR so heavily played, and it's going to be the best card. So it's, yeah. I think TDR is way more broken than Boba Fett, which is probably I hope is not a controversial opinion. I feel that one's pretty reasonable. Although Boba Fett is really good. That's not to say Boba is bad, but I think TDR is the most powerful card in this game. So those bans kind of changed how I was looking to target the format. Specifically, Asajj Droid Manufacturer is a deck that I love, but with Triple Dark Raid being banned, that was I was really built around that last time we were talking about the list. So I didn't feel great about that for the expected metagame. I was really worried that Cad Tarkin Town was going to pick up a lot of the same things, and IG-2000 is a great card in that deck, and I really didn't want to be playing Droid Manufacturer into an IG-2000 field. And so kind of the other deck I had talked about potentially being on board with was the Shadows of the Galaxy Han, or Young Han, with green, kind of looking to go over the top of Sabine. And I think that one just kind of... there's some interesting ideas going on there, and I don't hate that deck, but I think it's just a couple cards short, a couple points of synergy, and also just Han is a very vulnerable leader compared to other leaders that are very threatening on 5 or come out cheaper. He does not do enough as a unit to quite warrant his deck building considerations, I think, at this time. But that red-green list is something that I'm interested in returning to at a later point. But all that is to say, probably 2 or 3 weeks before the event, I kind of felt that Quinlan was the most solidly untouched deck from this, and a really difficult deck to play against, and I think a reasonably easy deck to play. In my testing, I have found Sabine really difficult to pilot. Your baseline curve outs are pretty straightforward, but talking about when to ping, when not to ping with Sabine, how to effectively jockey the initiative is something that I find challenging, and sideboarding can be really difficult to not dilute your main game plan too much, and I also just somewhat have a fundamental lack of understanding of how Darksaber works in that deck, and what matchups it's really good in, and what matchups it's really a trap that you fall into outside of like obvious things like, oh, hey, my opponent's going to have Bamboozle's post board, I should not play Darksaber. Like, I understand that part, but I guess what I'm just trying to highlight here is I struggle to get exactly to where I want to be with Sabine, and I felt that like in the 2 to 3 weeks of testing I could do, Quinlan was probably going to get me there because it is much more of just curving out and doing disruptive things. And so, so that's where I ended up, and I ended up on this list. I like Quinlan, and it makes a lot of difficult choices for your opponent, and you can be really punishing. And so it's a very difficult deck to play against, but again, you're just kind of like going 2, 3, 4, 5 with a pretty reliable curve. And so this list that I arrived on is not tremendously different. I think the cards to highlight would be Grogu and Poe Dameron as pretty big departures. I think Red 5 is a card that I've seen some people not seen some people. There's a lot of people that play Red 5, a lot of people that don't. I mean, it's maybe like a 50-50 split of the metagame. Maybe I'm more in the minority there, but that's because I have a control brain at the end of the day, and I really like Red 5 for just when you... Quinlan plays very poorly from behind, but Red 5 is a card that plays pretty well when you're ahead. That like if you can just tag a point of damage on here and there, now it's attacking and dealing more damage to the damage units. It really helps you stay ahead, and so that's kind of what I liked about it. Grogu was something where I was trying to be more aware of Sabine and their ability to, Wing Leader's not really something they want to do against this deck, but like Bamboozle or Darksaber is, and I was also trying to be aware of Han Green as kind of a re-emerging deck, and Grogu is good against the Falcon stuff that or the piloting that they're doing, as well as just being pretty good against the leader Han, by messing up the number of resources that they want to have access to. Although Grogu is very face up, so it's like you're not really like surprising your opponent with it, but you are disrupting them over the course of a game. So I think the rest of this is like relatively stock. Poe Dameron. A card that I found absolutely embarrassing in testing was Han Solo, Reluctant Hero, which I have over here because my friend Nikki Morgan really was speaking highly of it in the mirror, so I was trying to give it some respect in that way. That like I was expecting to see a good portion of the mirror having access to that. The last couple of slots over here I was really tough on. Like in the sideboard, the third Grogu, the 3 Bamboozles, and the 3 Choms and Doulas, I felt like pretty strongly about. And these other choices I were more flexible on. But Tech, I think, is just great into control decks and the mirror, and gets a lot of equity out of a singular sideboard slot. And Han was just kind of for the mirror in particular to try to go over the top. But in general, I find that this card is pretty underwhelming and has a lot of problems where it gets stuck in your hand. And so I really like that Poe Dameron functions in a similar way, but comes down quite a bit earlier, although it doesn't have the same turn impact. So really, so while I do think there's a difference, it's also kind of important to evaluate Poe as a 6-drop and Han Solo as a 7-drop when you're trying to compare the two of them together, because it's very easy to say, oh, well, this costs 5 and that costs 7. It's way better to play the 5-drop. But in reality, we're talking about like a 6 and 7. And it's a lot closer when it's 6 and 7, but I still feel strongly about Poe, and I was just afraid of a lot of upgrades, to be quite honest. And so I feel like this list is pretty hostile to upgrades, but not hostile enough. We'll talk a little bit about the tournament. The first round, I got paired against Kira ECL. And I got torn apart pretty brutally in that match. My opponent went like power of the dark side, flip Kira, overwhelming barrage into Avenger, and it was over. And then in the second game, there was some shenanigans that they got up to with devastating gunships, and once they got a couple Kira activations on their devastating gunships, it was just so difficult for me to push on the air. And then the evader on the ground was all that it took to really just lock me out of that arena. So I was down pretty bad after the first the first match. That was a brutal match. But in the second round, I got to play against Sabine ECL, which is kind of what I'm really trying to target here. And I feel, and my hesitance when I talk about that is like this match was like really close, which made me feel really bad too, because I thought I was like very well prepared in terms of gameplay and card selection to like do it, and then I just was like barely skating by. I did win that match in 3, and they were 3 close games, but I was also a little bit rattled coming out of that one. And no offense to my opponent, they also had some like sideboard cards for me in specific that were like equally good and not very good. Eager Escort Fighter, the 4/1 with ambush for 3 space unit. They had that, which was like really good when I would just like tap out for red 5, but also I was able to engineer some situations with Kira where or no, I forget the exact context, but I was able to look at their hand and then just not deploy a space unit, and so then their hand was a little awkward, so then they just played the Eager Escort Fighter to add pressure, and then it dies to a single Quinlan ping. So it's really awkward. Although I do also have respect for the Eager Escort Fighter, because that does seem really great into Han Green, which was a pretty common matchup. And speaking of Han Green, that was my third match. And boy, howdy, were those games not competitive. I got trounced in those. Game 1, I don't recall what went on as much, but game 2 was like seared into my memory because I kept a hand of Spark, Force Throw, Ezra Bridger. And so I go turn 1 Spark them. They have 2 of the JTL Falcons and another Falcon, and a 4th card that I can't remember, but it wasn't one of the ones that came up later. So I can't take them off of a Falcon turn 1. So they're just like free to do that. And it just is the JTL Falcon, which is the best thing for them because there's no drawback to just leaving it in play for multiple turns. And then turn 2, they go Chewie. They top deck Chewie, put that on the Falcon, hit me for 7. I deploy my Ezra, and then the following turn they go Han Solo. They top deck Han Solo and R2D2, so they started off with the Han Solo, and so attacked me for 11 damage, I believe that is, and so at that point I'm at like 18. And they just claim, and all I have is an Ezra Bridger in hand with 2 force throws and no high CMC, no high resource value cards in my hand, so I can't even like force throw myself to like guarantee that I clear this. So I force throw my opponent, and they just discard a salvage. Was one of the other cards that they drew. So it just, I don't even deal any points of damage with that. So yeah. So that was a brutal. So yeah, I didn't even have anything to like draw to with Tarkin Town. I looked with Ezra when I attacked to see if I hit a bamboozle to maybe pull things back together, but that was not there. So that was a brutal loss, and really frustrating. The Han deck is pretty unstoppable when it has that draw. In the moment, I felt like I was unprepared and that maybe I didn't mulligan aggressively enough because I kept that hand thinking that force throw was going to get me out of there. And because in my experience so far, the discard package was really good versus Han. That ended up not playing out at all, and so I should have mulliganed for a hand that had access to Grogu's. I never saw Bamboozle in those offerings, so that was not really on the table. But Grogu in particular was like, maybe I should have mulliganed for that to try to hold the Falcon back. But even so, that ends up in an awkward space where, like, okay, if they have a 11-11 in play, I can't just claim every turn with Grogu because then I just die to Han Solo leader. So it was that was pretty bad. But and so I was 1-2 at that point, and I went to go get lunch for my friend and I. Ended up being that the place we wanted to go to for lunch was jam-packed and also didn't do takeout, which is things that happen when you like go to a city you've never been in before and you're figuring these things out. So then I found another place for lunch, and while I was waiting in line for food, it was like 2 minutes left in the round, and I was just like, that's the joy of Melee, at least. I was able to drop on my phone there and come back and play some side events, but I really felt from those two matches of getting brutalized by Kira and Han Green. Those were two decks that were extremely heavily represented in the room, and not one that my deck was particularly well suited to beat, and not matchups that I felt confident playing, because it was already very clear from the Han Green opponent that I played against that they had a different understanding of the matchup than testing partners that I had worked with on Han Green. So myself included as one of those testing partners. I'm not trying, that's not shade towards the people, that's me too, primarily, of like playing Han against myself and like not seeing how aggressively they could push for some of those lines. So I was pretty content to drop at 1-2, especially because the cut was 6-2 or better for day 2, and I had 2 losses early. It's like I could win out and probably not make it, and I wanted to go play some side events. So so this was definitely a failure, and I'm very comfortable admitting that. Not admitting, I'm very comfortable acknowledging that. I was not, the room was more prepared for me than I was for them, and I'm not as smart as I think I am with some of these choices. Like, I still think Poe Dameron's better than Han Solo Reluctant Hero, but most Quinlan players that did well had Han Solo Reluctant Hero and not Poe. I don't know what that means. I struggle to understand how you put Han Solo in this main deck. But there's also some worth that, like, okay, maybe Han Solo is useful because it has resource value 7 and you can force throw yourself to like deal with Chewies. And that's not something that this build really does. So the Kira matchup, that on the other hand, that's just how it goes. You know, that's the mid-range deck that's looking to go over the top of other mid-range decks. And so specifically like the ECL version is just going to be pretty tough, because like I put in, you know, red 5 and then the Kira player ECLs a Fet's Fire Spray into it, and like I'm in bad shape if I don't have a 4-drop, which of course I don't, to follow it up with. So yeah, the Kira, maybe the Kira Data Vault matchup is better. That was kind of, I was thinking Kira Data Vault would be like an okay. I'm not feeling great, but like the discard is going to provide some value. Spark of Rebellion hitting their resupplies is like a really nice place to be with the strategy. And so I don't know. I might be out of my mind on that one, and that's okay. But I don't hate this list. I'm not sure I would run it back, because I kind of think that Grogu and Kira are not very good for how the metagame is developing. I would like to see maybe... so I've got a store showdown coming up. I'm going to try K2SO over Kira, and Guerrilla Soldiers was a card I really liked in testing, but I kind of shied away from as I made this build a bit more interactive. And like Guerrilla Soldiers just kind of has a weird counter synergy with Grogu, I guess. Not counter synergy. They're kind of off plan from each other. Grogu and Guerrilla Soldiers don't really fit well together in a deck, so I think that's certainly an angle you want to be more one or the other. And so I want to try, Guerrilla Soldiers and K2SOs in this build to make it a a bit more aggressive. And then, but maybe there's like a Rebels package that I look to side back in at some point too. There's a lot of play here. There's a lot of interesting space to work on this. So I'm also kind of okay leaving this as like my main deck for the coming months. If I get the opportunity to play in a PQ, I'd kind of like to try continuing to work on this. But yeah, so that's kind of enough about Quinlan. I am by no means like a master of the archetype. I am like barely competent, but some interesting thoughts to share on that one. Excuse me. Whew, okay, so after I dropped out of the tournament and ate my lunch, I went to go do some drafts because I love Limited. As you can probably tell from this channel, a fair amount of Limited with Magic the Gathering just Magic the Gathering, all the wacky limited formats on Moto. But unfortunately, my local store really has, or not just my local store, but the local stores, like the 3 or 4 in the area, don't really have a desire to play limited. So I don't, and even when there is, it's like it doesn't line up with my schedule. So I was really excited to play some side events, play some limited, because that's not something you can simulate online or by yourself. And it was really cool because I think JTL is an interesting limited format. It is dominated by Vader as an incredibly powerful leader, but I do also think there's some play to that, and you can like interact around that. So let's talk about this first draft that I did. I did 2 drafts, so we got 2 to talk about. And this one, I don't recall exactly what my leaders were to pick from. I know it was Rose and Piet. I want to say maybe Rio Durant was the other one. But I didn't want to like trap myself too badly into Piet. I just wanted to take Rose. I really like Rose. Just a 4/6 or 5, beats down a lot, and this ability is cracked when it gets activated multiple times. And then my pack 1 pick 1 was Turbo Laser Salvo, which is not always incredible, but I kind of felt like when I had Rose and Turbo Laser Salvo, I knew cards like Dakar Cargo Frigate were going to be more on the table for me. So I was kind of comfortable taking Turbo Laser Salvo and seeing if this blue-green heroism lane would open up for me. And it really did. And my second pick in pack 1 was Blue Leader, and then I got past a Harris and Dula after that. And I felt really good about my position, and kind of from where I looked at the table, it was a good seat to be in for this. SWU is a little bit weird in that you can like actually, like when you look at people's leaders, you can like gain a ton of information about what kind of color pairing you want to be going into. Also interesting there is just like reading people's body language. What leaders are they like flicking in their card pool? What are they most like fixated on? Can give you a lot of information about how you want to be doing this. So yeah, Blue Leader and Harrison Dula after first picking the Turbo Laser Salvo. I was pretty comfortable locking in after that, and really there was no need to deviate from that. Even in pack 3, I got like these 2 Phoenix Squadron A-Wings like in the middle of the pack, so those were incredible pickups for this deck. But I was all in all like pretty pleased with how this one turned out, and this ended up being a 3-0, which I was pretty psyched about. I have some reasonable turn 1 space plays, but honestly, I think I'm like a little weak to Vader in this strategy. But the Turbo Laser Salvo does also go a long way to shoring that up. That like the tokens just become too much to contain, then it was I had at least a button to press for that, and also just a lot of good vehicles with Rose, specifically the 2 ambush ones of Blue Leader and retrofitted Airspeeder were very effective with her. And so I played against I beat Vader Yellow, and then I beat Vader Red. And then in the finals, I was able to beat a Luke green opponent. But this deck also just had pretty good grind power. Like the space curve here is really just exactly I think not exactly. That's an over exaggeration because I don't know this limited format so well. But I think this is like a really good baseline of what you would want a curve to look like. Like 2, 3, 4, just very comfortable walking up it in very decent card quality. Aside from this Adept Arc 170, that's one of the weakest cards in this deck. But then like 2 U-Wing Landers on 5 is fantastic, and these 6 drops are both just incredibly reliable units. And it's also like this package of 5 cards over here made Turbo Laser Salvo a pretty desirable card for this. And I didn't feel like I was really trapping myself into playing this. And I only got to play it once, but it was pretty fun. So that part of this draft was quite successful. I was pretty pleased with it. So for the second draft, things did not go so well. I ended up with an Akbar deck. The person to the right of me, where I was passing my leaders to, was very interested in Wedge. So my 3 leaders that I opened were Asajj, Rio Durant, and Wedge. No. It was Asajj, Can't remember now. Asajj Ventress was the one that I took. And I tried to screw over the person immediately after me by giving them a duplicate Wedge, but also kind of like locking them into that since that R, so it kind of seemed like what they were interested in. However, so I had Asajj. I was really interested in playing Asajj because she's very good at dealing with the Vader tokens as well as like the Vader units before they start pooping out tokens. So I really wanted to prioritize her. However, the person who was passing to me got to do how I was trying to screw over the person to the right of me with Wedge. The person that was passing to me got to do that, and they passed me 2 Akbars, which is really bad because Akbar is like terrible. I really did not like him. And I think this draft was a bit of an experiment for me too, in like learning how to better draft, because I kind of got a little magic brained with this one because I blue was open like from the start, getting passed to me, and I was really happy with that. I took I think there was a Director Krennic that I took pretty early, but it was also like really nice. I was just getting past like good neutral blue cards, like the Cloak Starfighter, the Out the Airlocks, the Desperate Commandos covering the wing, those cards, and the Outer Rim Outlaws. Like I was getting a lot of that in pack 1, so I was feeling pretty comfortable that like, okay, I can be blue for Asajj Ventress, but if things go wrong, then I can be yellow with Akbar. And I really tried to hedge myself with, because the last card I got in pack 1 was this Gold Leader, which I think is not like, it's not a busted uncommon, but like this is a very reasonable card, and especially if you're prolonging the game, that's like a good card to take advantage of. They can get you some pretty good trades because there's a 5-cost shield that is massive. The shield part is like weak to the tie tokens, but because the Gold Leader has that ability about the attackers getting debuffed when you're defending, it actually can retain its shield somewhat well. So yeah, I kind of ended up building this more control shell because in pack 2, the villainy stuff really dried up, which wasn't surprising because the person to my left, their name was Davis, because I have that written down here actually because I played them later. They were like really in on Vader, so I kind of figured So at the end of pack 1, I saw that I identified that like, okay, blue heroism is massively open at this table because for Gold Leader to be the last pick, people really don't like this card, and it's just pretty okay. And it's not the best thing ever, but I was really trying to read that into as a signal. And then also identifying that, okay, the player who's now going to be passing to me is most likely playing a Vader deck, so I'm not going to be getting good villainy cards in this pack, and I'm already leaning a little bit this way. To me, that kind of made sense of like, okay, I'll make the switch and kind of commit to being Akbar in pack 2. And not horrible, but also there's just not really a lot of stuff going on. Like the yellow cards that I got out of this exchange were not particularly exciting. Like the corporate light cruisers are pretty nice slapper on the top end, but really what it opened the door for me were some of these blue heroism cards, specifically Yularen and Phantom, that I got in pack 2, that I was pretty pleased about. I got the Yularen super late, no respect on that. So, which was really funny to me because if you might recall from my last video, I spent a lot of time working on a deck utilizing Admiral Yularen with Akbar. So I was like, that part I definitely got trapped in the middle of pack 2 when I see this Yularen, and I'm like, well, I mean, I'm already kind of in the market for this change of lane, and I do think Akbar synergizes pretty well with Yularen. So ended up like locking that in shortly into pack 2. And yeah, this I don't think this deck is embarrassing, but it is bad. And I think a lot of why it is bad is because Akbar is bad. It's very difficult to get off his activated ability without being massively behind on tempo. And then as a leader, he is really understated. And trying to generate tokens at that stage of the game is typically not what you want to be doing. So I ended up going 1 and 2 with this deck, and that feels like an appropriate record for it. I do not believe this is a trophy quality deck. I also don't think it's an 0-3 deck. Yularen plus Akbar did lead to some pretty stupid stuff, and in game 1 or in the first match, all right, they're all best of 1, which was kind of annoying, but like whatever. So the first game I played against a gentleman named Mordecai on Major Von Reg Yellow, and I just about decked him because I just I had so much power and toughness in my deck that we were just able to get to that stage of the game, and I was just able to trade off everything plus value, which was really just crazy. So like I got to live the controlled dream on that one where I just ground his entire deck to an absolute pulp. And then in the second game, I played versus that gentleman Davis, who was to the left of me in the pod on Vader Blue, and he just rolled me. That was a really cool game. We also went super long, but there was just a lot of exchanges that he made that I was just really unable to keep up with. One particularly cool part was he had Academy Graduate, I think is the name of the card. It's the pilot that gives Sentinel. He had that attached to the uncommon Chimera, and I was getting ready to kill it. And then he played the rare capital ship Corvus, and which lets you move pilots around. So then he was able to just take the pilot off of the Chimera, let it die, get his 2 TIE fighters, and then put the Sentinel upgrade on the Corvus, and just have another massive roadblock. And that was just one of several interactions that went incredibly poorly for me in that game. So I got bodied by a well-constructed deck and well-played deck. So that was like very commanding that like, yeah, I'm not winning this one. And then I had in the final round I lost to Luke Yellow, and while I do feel I was slightly unfavored, my draw was also just heinous at that point. And I think like the first 2 turns I didn't do anything after mulliganing, and that just happens sometimes. And that's best of 1 just being kind of garbage. But like my opponent's deck was also very lean and aggressive and like built to capitalize on that. They also had a sequence that like I hadn't really thought of, despite playing it some of it in the pre-release with the I think it's like Black Squadron X-Wing. It's a 5-drop and Cunning Heroism, 4/6, and when it becomes upgraded, you can attack, and it gets +2/+0 for the attack. And my opponent just had that, and then strapped Pilot Luke, the leader, into that, and just attacked for 10, and it was like, or attacked for 9, excuse me. And yeah, that was horrible. I almost stabilized coming back from that, but was not quite able to get there. But they were all like interesting games, so I was pretty pleased with how this one, or not pleased. This one I was not pleased with, but comfortable with how it turned out. I got trapped a little bit into doing something too cute. Probably should have stuck to my guns on Asajj. And there's a lesson to be learned there that like it's hard to speak in such blanket terms, but like I do think in this particular instance I should have stayed with the stronger leader and had a weaker deck, but the strength of the leader would have made up for something that this deck was lacking. It would have been a lot more interactive on the early turns, and that would have been much better for me. And that's not going to be true all the time, but I think in this instance it was right to force Ventress instead of trying to identify this open lane, and that's a good lesson to learn. If the leaders are closer in power level, then maybe that's not so much part of the equation, but I think for specifically Akbar versus Ventress in this set, I think this was probably a mistake in retrospect that cost me pretty dearly, especially because the Vader player murdered me so badly that it was like very direct consequences of my actions that defeated me in that draft. And so that leads to the final side event that I played the day after, which was a promo event, and this was a constructed premiere again. So I was a little bit off Quinlan at that point. I was a little dejected on that one. I'm kind of coming back around to it. I do want to invest some more time in Quinlan, but I had one more premiere deck that I brought with me, and I said, if I'm going to lose, I'm going to lose having fun. And yeah, you know this channel. You know what it is. It's Asajj Ventress Droid Manufacturer. I can't do anything else with my life. I just have to play this. I can't do anything else. And it was really fun. I had a fabulous time in this event. I went 2-2, so we'll just get that right out of the way. This was completely average. However, for completely average for a 300-person event, I'm pretty jazzed that I still am like, I'm cooking something different. And it's really fun for me, and I had a good time. So let's talk about what I'm doing specifically in this version, because Triple Dark Raid is no longer in the format, so we kind of had to remove the vehicle package and kind of return to some of the old roots of just being a more ground-based beatdown deck, which is something that is potentially good right now as more players are taking to space and doing stuff with Chewbacca. This might be, I can't even tell you it's well positioned. There's angles that we can build towards to prey on those kinds of strategies. That's a better way of articulating that, because I never want to try to, not never, I don't want to be trying to sell you, the audience, that this deck is great. I'm just trying to make it better. I want it to be better at each point that we go through this process. Not that it's ever like, not that ever it's like, gonna win you a PQ or something like that. So, a lot of the cards that I took out were, of course, Triple Dark Raid, since I just can't play that one, and some weaker space units that went along with that. Mercenary Gunship, Confederate Courier, and Magna Guard Wing Leader are all just units that I don't believe hold up in space now that JTL is in the format and has a ton of more space units. Those are just not cards that are really going to survive and trade well in that environment. So I was pretty happy to get rid of those. And I was also thinking, okay, I want to be more focused on the ground. Clone Commander Cody is a card that I'm interested in coming back to. And Invincible is a new addition that I was really excited about. Got to play a little bit with Triple Dark Raid in the format, and it was just really a perfect fit for this deck. Without Triple Dark Raid, it's less clear if it's a good fit, but it's still something that I'm interested in playing with for now. Another JTL card that I talked about before that's really exciting is Guerrilla Soldiers, which I think we're just kind of learning as a community that this is just a good value card. It shows up in Quinlan. It shows up in the Boba Fett, the JTL Boba Fett decks, and I think it's just reasonable to play in a lot of circumstances, and definitely here. Here it is awesome. Just getting good value. The Trooper tag is really exciting to hit it with General tag. That was an unintended pun. That was cute. Guerrilla Soldier is just a pretty natural fit. Another card that I removed sort of in testing for this, and this is a point that I've talked about before, I wanted to try playing some without resupply. I still really like resupply, but as I've talked about before, I feel like I don't have a good heuristic for understanding whether or not it's good or how good it is in the deck, and I've just kind of been frustrated by that lack of information, so I was just kind of wanting to try some without it, see if I really missed it. To be honest, I kind of missed it. So it's something I think I want to go back to in the future. A card that I don't believe I've talked about at all in the past, but wanted to try in this iteration is Poggle the Lesser. I was really skittish of this card because it is pretty slow and it's kind of more grindy, meant to have more sacrifice fodder, like built to... Let me start over. It's a card that is useful to slowly over time accumulate fodder that you can use to exploit things or sacrifice to other things. I don't think of this as an aggressive card. However, I did want to think about this in terms of like the Tarkin Town metagame. B1 Security Team is a card that I just do not want to ever play again in a constructed deck. And I was kind of like, all right, Poggle the Lesser, you at least have 4 toughness. If my opponent spends a Tarkin Town on Poggle, then I'm just happy. I'm just going to be okay with that. And he honestly overperformed throughout the whole event. He was an excellent turn 1 play and rivaled Separatist Commando when it really pops off. So I was actually very wrong about this card, and I think it's something that I'm interested in continuing playing. Another card I was trying out a bit before, and I kind of wanted to lean back into more with Poggles, was Apology Accepted, to try to buff up Ventress even more, get a good event trigger in there, and just continue applying pressure. And this card underwhelmed me pretty significantly again. It's probably failed me for the last time. I'm okay to set this one down and say I tried, and it just was not really getting there for me. But that's okay. One that I am... okay, 2 other one-ofs here, because I just kind of filled this out at the last second. These were not the most well thought out. Droid Commando I was just throwing back in because I was like, all right, we're doing more ground stuff. He's a fine 3-drop. Unnatural Life is a card I was interested in trying out, specifically paired with Cobb Vanth. Again, trying to be more focused on the ground in this build. I thought Cobb Vanth would be interesting because he can help you trade, and he makes you more consistent at finding General Tag, which I have kind of identified to be the best card in the deck. Or Waylay, it's close, but like General Tag is like the most powerful proactive thing that we're doing in this deck. So Cobb Vanth was brought in to try to add some additional consistency there, and Unnatural Life was kind of like, all right, if I'm seeing more tags or I have Cobb Vanth in the deck now, then maybe this can generate some interesting haste damage as well. However, you astute viewers probably have enough understanding of this game to know that Unnatural Life is just a very bad card and does not really belong in any deck under almost any circumstance. I feel like this was really close, and it's just this rider of only reanimating units that have died this turn. It's just too hard to set up. It's just really difficult to do that, and even when you do, it's in this strategy, it's just okay. And I feel like there's other more impactful things that we can be doing here. So Unnatural Life, Apology Accepted, definitely no-goes in this deck. I kind of want to bring back resupplies. Cobb Vanth, I'm really not sure about at this time. He's very much okay. He is fine, and I don't know. That's just going to require a little bit more testing. I kind of, in my head, I thought Cobb Vanth would be more justified with Apology accepted in the deck. I don't think that's necessary. That kind of synergy is not really required. And also, I think Cobb Vanth is sort of just largely going to be okay in a format with JTL Boba and like Cad Tarkentown being slower, more mid-rangey decks that just sort of dump damage on the table, but let me have some optionality in that. And Cobb Vanth is like marginally useful in that context, where he can supply actually a pretty reasonable amount of toughness to the board over a period of time, which makes him a little bit interesting. And like a better value play than others might, other cards in that spot might be, while also being like, okay, if your opponent's playing, to the ground arena, then he's just naturally going to generate value. So I'm kind of okay with sticking for Cobb Vanth for now. So yeah, I'd probably just trade these Apology accepted for resupplies back, and then this Unnatural Life. I don't know. But let me talk about the event a little bit. In the first round, I played against Han Green again, and I got dumpstered in the exact same fashion that I got dumpstered in the main event, which is that they went turn 1 JTL Falcon, turn 2 Chewie, turn 3 Han Solo, and then there's just nothing you can do. Particularly in this configuration that I have brought to you now. This is just completely dead in the water to that. There are 2 cards that come to mind that I should be sideboarding that would be effective in combating that, and that is No Good to Me Dead and Frozen in Carbonite, both of which are very good against those kind of Voltron lines, and something that, this deck needs to be building towards. And some of these sideboard cards like Lurking TIE Phantom and Unmasking the Conspiracy, which are a little bit broadly useful but untargeted, those just need to be anti-Chewie cards. And this Han matchup definitely taught me that. In the second round, I played Sabine ECL, which I feel is a horrible matchup, but I was able to eke out some wins there. They were close games, but also games that I felt like I deserved to win, which is sort of a weird dynamic and kind of a dumb thing to try to articulate. But they were close games. It was a good match, and I definitely felt like I made some choices to come out ahead in those. And quickly bounced back from that, though, in the third round, played against Sabine ECL again, and lost those pretty handily, with applying some pressure, but Wrecker ECL was just a lot of damage, and we have a very low life total. So the Sabine decks are now even more space oriented. So I am interested in those No Good to Me Deads and Frozen in Carbonites. I don't know if that's enough for the space in this matchup, or if we need a little bit more, but I also kind of, I don't quite know exactly how to take this deck in terms of direction, because with TDR, this was a much more space-oriented deck, and now, without that, we're just playing Elite P-38s, Geonosis and Patrol Fighters, and Invincibles, and these are, like, okay cards, but they're sort of inadequate at helping us stabilize space. Geonosis and Patrol Fighter would be good at stabilizing space if they didn't make Chewbacca the way that they made him. So that's just great. I'm being a little facetious there. I'm not actually that upset with Chewbacca. I'm more upset with Han Solo still existing as a leader. That one I'm a little irked at. But Chewbacca is, I think, on the whole, probably a nice thing for the game to just, like, you can tap out and make a big unit and not feel completely useless. And I really think that's going to be one of the things that, like, the metagame just has to adjust to. Like, those 2 cards that I listed, No Good to Me Dead and Frozen in Carbonite, are pretty easy to incorporate into this shell. three other cards that come to mind are Sanctioner Shuttle, which I've seen some people start to turn to as an anti-Chewbacca card. And we're reasonably good at turning on Coordinate for such an effect. And then there's Traitorous, which is a bit expensive at 5 resources, but this is a resupply deck that we're kind of building here, so maybe that's something that we're interested in. And then Take Captive is a different version of Sanctioner Shuttle, which I don't think we have the density of space units in this deck right now to support, but is something to consider for the future. So Chewbacca is a very frustrating card to play against, but I do think we just kind of have to recalibrate our deck building as a community to try and work around that, and then it'll be fine. But it's kind of the same thing that like when Lurking TIE Phantom came out, the control decks had to completely rework how their ability to answer that. And now I think that's just kind of, we're all going to be moving to, be able to operate in a space that is sometimes frequented by Chewbacca. In the 4th round of this event, to not derail myself too much further, I played against Cad Tarkentown. I felt like that matchup was going to be quite bad. In practice, it ended up being actually kind of okay for us. Cad does put a lot of damage out there, but I was pleasantly surprised by cards like Poggle and Cobb Vanth in this build of the deck that I was like actually pretty reasonably able to handle a lot of that damage. And Invincible really got to shine in that matchup too, where we're like going back and forth, interacting, and here's my 6/6, deal with it. And that was really nice to have. And I was quite pleased with that. The CAD deck also being on the more controlling end meant that Guerrilla Soldiers really got to shine, then push a ton of damage early, and versus a Tarkentown deck that doesn't have access to healing, that's just puts a lot of permanent pressure on them to never lose control of the board, and eventually you can kind of piece something together. So I felt that matchup was going to be very bad because IG-2000 is backbreaking, and both of the games I won in the match where he had turn 4 or turn 3. On my flip turn, he had IG-2000 and cleaned everything up, and I was still able to win those games, which was really cool. And something I was very pleased about. But also, something that is different there is that is a play pattern that existed with Django, which I found, which was unbeatable for this. But CAD just killing the 2 tokens, but not outright killing Ventress, or not exhausting Ventress in the way that Django did in that situation, is a crucial difference, where their Tarkentown deck is much less effective at defending against her. 4-Lom's still a problem, but in some ways I was happier to see IG-2000 than 4-Lom immediately gobbling up Ventress on my flip turn, which was interesting and not quite something that I had thought about beforehand in that way. So, a lot of cool stuff to work on with this deck. I'm still not done with it yet. I think I'd want to be focused on Quinlan for the immediate future, but we'll see how that goes. And yeah, that was my trip. I also really enjoyed seeing Richmond. It was a beautiful city, and there was a lot of fun things to do. But all in all, I was reasonably comfortable with how I did. 1-2 in the main event, 3-0 a draft, 1-2 a draft, 2-2 this other constructed event. So all in all, I think that was 6 wins, 6 losses, which not that anybody's counting in aggregate across that, but at least for my peace of mind, that was like, I felt pretty good about that. I came to play. I wasn't, I was certainly not one of the best players in the room by any stretch, so I feel like that record is representative of where I was supposed to land. And I've got some space to learn, but also enough of a fire lit under me that it's like I want to do better at one of these things in the future. So that's nice to have too. That I didn't do great, but I didn't walk away feeling bad about myself. I walked away feeling pleased about some of the things I had done, but also wanting to keep working at this. So that feels like a very comfortable headspace for me to be in at this time. So we'll see how the Quinlan goes in the future for me, and if it doesn't go great, I'm just gonna go back to playing Asajj Ventress and then like just keep 2-2ing events and having a great time as I slowly iterate a mediocre deck list. So either one of those outcomes, not a bad thing. So thank you for watching. Appreciate that. Let me know if this kind of format was interesting, talking about a bunch of different decks. I wish we could talk about draft better, but I was pleased with my analysis on that and would like to do more of that in the future, because this is an interesting, the leader drafting in particular is a really weird setup that is very exploitable, but it's still pretty dynamic. I think it's not as flexible as like drafting in Magic the Gathering, but it's still pretty good. So yeah, I've rambled long enough, but thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. I appreciate it.